Well, folks, there is tons of breaking news. Joe Biden has dropped out of the presidential race. He's still missing. We don't know whether he's alive or dead. I mean, we think he's kind of alive. He might be a little bit dead. Very difficult to tell at this point. Possible that he's Schrodinger's president. You know, whether you see him or not actually determines whether he's alive or dead. We'll get to all that in just a moment. First, your reminder, there's too much happening in this election for you to miss a minute. We are standing for conservative values. We are fighting for conservative values, and we need your help to bring you the content that you want and that you need as we go forward here. This is why we need your help. Your subscription over at dailywired.com. Use code FIGHT for 47% off your annual membership and join the fight. That is the big thing that we need from you. Okay, so the news of the day is that Kamala Harris, the coronation is complete. The Democrats are indeed going to try to make fetch happen. So you'll recall that she ran one of the worst presidential races in history back in 2019, 2020. In fact, she dropped out before she even received a single vote in the primaries. Then she became vice president because Joe Biden needed a black woman on the ticket. And then she was terrible, and her approval rating was in the low 30s. Well, now, because Democrats have no other place to turn, she's consolidated the support to become officially the Democratic nominee for president of the United States. Joe Biden has been forced out. And honest to goodness, it's probably smart of Biden to drop at this point, given the fact that he was almost certainly going to lose to Donald Trump in November. Now he can at least wash his hands of it. He's not going to be blamed for the loss. Now, there might be some retrospective blame cast upon him if Kamala Harris ends up losing for, number one, picking her as vice president, and for number two, not getting out of the way earlier to allow for a serious democratic process. But given the fact there is no democratic process, given the fact that Democrats at the party elite level have decided to simply force Kamala into place, it is what it is, and Joe Biden is now out of the way. He is no longer the story other than his absence and the fact that he's still president of the United States, which we'll get to later. It turns out having a missing president of the United States who goes absent for weeks at a time is probably not a good look to the rest of the world. But in terms of campaign 2024, it is all about Kamala. According to the Washington Post, a majority of Democratic delegates have now pledged to support Vice President Harris as the party's next presidential nominee, signaling she is likely to secure the nomination next month. As of Monday evening, 2,214 delegates from at least 36 states had endorsed Harris. That is out of 4,000 delegates, which means she has a pure majority ready to go. This thing got locked up inside of essentially 48 hours of Joe Biden dropping out of the race, which really suggests that this was all pre-planned. Now, all of these sort of heartburn and angst that you were hearing from the Democratic Party, it seems a little bit overwrought in retrospect, given the fact that not only did they have the support lined up for Kamala Harris, they were basically ready to go with these giant money bombs almost immediately. So Nancy Pelosi yesterday announced her support for Kamala Harris, which essentially was the icing on the cake. It was the significant. Nancy Pelosi really is the leader of the Democratic Party. The two leaders of the Democratic Party, it was never Joe Biden. Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi are the leaders of the Democratic Party. I mean, so much so that it turns out that Nancy Pelosi was actively intervening in meetings with Joe Biden as early as 2021. According to the Wall Street Journal, President Biden had just finished trying to persuade a group of congressional Democrats to pass a $1 trillion infrastructure bill when Nancy Pelosi, then House Speaker, took the microphone. In 30 minutes of remarks on Capitol Hill, Biden had spoken disjointedly and failed to make a concrete ask of lawmakers, according to Democrats in the room. After he left, a visibly frustrated Pelosi told the group she would articulate what Biden had been trying to say, according to one lawmaker. That was October 2021. That month was the last time, according to the Wall Street Journal, Biden met with the House Democratic caucus on the Hill regarding legislation. That was 3 years ago. So Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama have been the de facto leaders of the Democratic Party since effectively Joe Biden was elected. And with Nancy Pelosi now endorsing Kamala Harris, with her now having garnered the support of the majority of the delegates, the money bombs are dropping everywhere. Democrats are dropping money bombs on Kamala Harris. They also dropped a giant money bomb on the economy, which is how you got, 40-year highs in inflation. Saudi Arabia recently ended its 50-year petrodollar deal with the United States. That does have the additional ability to weaken the United States dollar. Since 1974, Saudi has sold oil solely in U.S. dollars, which was huge for our global economic dominance. Well, now they'd like other options. If there's less demand for the U.S. dollar, what exactly happens to its values? It's for reasons like this. I feel it's important to diversify at least some of your savings into gold. You can do that with the help of our friends over at Birch Gold. Right now, qualifying purchases by July 31st are eligible to get a one-of-a-kind, limited edition Golden Truth Bomb. Makes a fancy paperweight. The only way to claim your eligibility is you text BEN to 989898. Protect your savings by diversifying away from the U.S. dollar with gold. Again, diversification is just a smart investment strategy, particularly in, Volatile times. These seem like kind of volatile times, do they not? Protect your savings by diversifying. Text BEN to 989898. Birch Gold will help you convert an old IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold for no money out of pocket. Right now, qualifying purchases will get a limited edition Golden Truth Bomb. Text BEN to 989898. Today, again, text BEN to 989898 to get started. Ask all your questions, get all those questions answered, and then when you're ready to diversify at least a little bit into precious metals, text BEN to 989898 to get started with my friends over at Birch Gold. According to Politico Playbook, a $150 million commitment by Democratic big money donors dropped less than a day after she made her candidacy for president official. Couple that with the $50 million drop that happened the day that Joe Biden dropped out of the race. Future Forward has already set aside $250 million for TV and digital advertising. Hundreds of millions of dollars came into play almost immediately, which again is a suggestion that this was all pre-planned. This thing clicked into place far too fast for it to have been spontaneous in any way, shape, or form. Now, that doesn't mean that Kamala Harris has a good strategy here. It turns out that she pretty clearly does not. We'll get to the polling data in just a moment here. But according to Politico, there was a big organizing call between Kamala Harris and tens of thousands of her supporters. This happened on Sunday. And apparently, here's what happened on the call. We need to defend our sister everywhere, read the meeting notes obtained by Politico. It is a thing to have MAGA world chasing you. Organizers behind the memo for this call urged anyone reading it to, quote, pick at least one section or part of a section of Project 2025 to read and become a subject matter expert in order to be armed with information and to support the effort that way. So again, the idea that they are going to be able to run on Project 2025 is absolutely ridiculous. But those on the virtual call were ready to get organized. Joteka Eddy, who founded Win with Black Women, which again, I'm always amazed by the level of tribal racialism that you are able to express so long as it is intersectional in nature. If this were Win with White Men, that would obviously not be acceptable in America's body politic. But apparently a group called Win with Black Women is totally fine. Quote, it was just really the excitement of black women and our allies not wanting to miss this historic moment. So apparently Letitia James, the corrupt attorney general of New York, has been working to gather the support of black attorneys general for Harris. Again, just tribal racialism. She announced Sunday that she and the 5 other black state attorneys general in the United States from Illinois, Maryland, Massachusetts, Minnesota, and Nevada will be part of a coalition working to back Kamala Harris. So you can tell what kind of campaign Kamala Harris is going to run pretty much right away. She is going to run an extremely intersectional campaign, a black female campaign. She's going to run the Barack Obama 2012 playbook. Now, the problem is Barack Obama's 2012 playbook came on the back of Barack Obama winning a huge election victory in 2008. You can run the intersectional playbook, but only if you win your first election by a huge margin. Democrats did not win the 2020 election by a huge margin. They actually won incredibly slim in a historically skewed election based on extraordinarily high levels of voter turnout, which again was based on a change in the rules in COVID. So if they're going to run a campaign from 2020, it is amazing to me that Democrats, instead of looking at the 2008 Barack Obama campaign, which was a huge victory, a huge historic level Democratic victory, instead of looking at that as the model for what they should do going forward, instead they look at 2012 as the model for what they should do going forward, despite the fact that Barack Obama lost 3 million absolute votes between 2008 and 2012. But that's the campaign that Kamala Harris is going to run. So last night, Kamala Harris did a campaign event. It was really for her own staffers. And she led off by praising Joe Biden. This, by the way, is going to be the chief vulnerability for Kamala Harris. We'll discuss all of her vulnerabilities in a moment. She is not a strong candidate. But her chief vulnerability is she's the vice president of a wildly unpopular administration. This administration does not have a list of accomplishments Americans like. It is amazing to watch all these people come out of the woodwork and declare that Joe Biden actually has been an amazing president. Now, a minute ago, they said he was really bad at presidenting. Then he dropped out, and suddenly he's an amazing president. Why? Well, they have to flip the narrative. If it turns out he's a crappy president and that Kamala Harris is his crappy vice president, well, then probably she's not a very good candidate. So here is Kamala Harris at the campaign event last night suggesting that Joe Biden has a legacy of accomplishments, which is wild since his main accomplishment is just beating Donald Trump. And then his secondary accomplishment, apparently, according to Democrats, is dying in a debate and dropping out of the race. Here's Kamala Harris.
Our president, Joe Biden, wanted to be here today. He is feeling much better and recovering fast, and he looks forward to getting back on the road. And I wanted to say a few words about our president. Joe Biden's legacy of accomplishment over the past 3 years is unmatched in modern history.
Oh, boy. How'd you like 4 years of that? Maybe 8 years of that. Would you love that? Would you love 8 years of that right there? By the way, his accomplishments are burning the Middle East to a crisp, lighting Ukraine on fire, destroying the economy via inflation, destroying whatever possibility there was of building of social fabric through radical social policy. I mean, truly, name the magical accomplishments of Joe Biden other than elevating Kamala Harris to the nomination via proxy. Because again, she has received zero, count them, zero Democratic primary votes ever in her entire life. And now she's the nominee for the president of the United States. So what is her campaign against Donald Trump going to be? She says that she's going to prosecute Trump. Honestly, like, really, this is all you got in the can? Seriously, this is what you got? So Democrats have been trying this crap since 2015. Since 2015, the idea has been Donald Trump is an out-of-the-box criminal, and we are going to prosecute the case against Donald Trump. Okay, guys, good luck with that. Seriously. Kamala Harris, they are trying to make fetch happen by selecting Kamala Harris, and she is trying to make fetch happen by going after Donald Trump on a prosecutorial basis. This is the kind of stuff that jazzes up a very, very small wing of the Democratic base and literally no one else. Here's Kamala Harris.
In the days and weeks ahead, I, together with you, will do everything in my power to unite our Democratic Party, to unite our nation, and to win this election. You know, as many of you know, before I was elected as vice president, before I was elected as United States Senator, I was the elected Attorney General, as I've mentioned, of California, and before that I was a courtroom prosecutor. In those roles, I took on perpetrators of all kinds. Predators who abused women, fraudsters who ripped off consumers, cheaters who broke the rules for their own gain. So hear me when I say, I know Donald Trump's type.
No, she's going to prosecute the president of the... Is she, though? I mean, she was a really bad prosecutor, by the way. If you don't believe me, go watch episode 1 of our series, Scamala, which is all about Kamala Harris. You can go watch that over at Daily Wire Plus right now when you use that 47% off and become a subscriber. Again, it's everything you need to know about Kamala Harris. We were prepared for Kamala Harris to be the nominee full on 2 weeks ago, which is why we cut that series. Okay, that is not... Okay, try it. Seriously, try it. You're going to prosecute... Donald Trump has 100% name recognition. 100%. No one's perception of Donald Trump is going to change from here on out. The question is, can Kamala Harris generate any enthusiasm? And honestly, I haven't seen so much fake enthusiasm for anything in American public life since Beyonce dropped her last album. The amount of fake ersatz enthusiasm Democrats are trying to gin up, and you can feel it. You can feel it's not real. You can feel they're trying to whip themselves into a lather over Kamala Harris. But there's a phrase that's historically been used about politics, which is that Democrats fall in love, Republicans fall in line. In this election, it's precisely the reverse. Republicans love their candidate. Overall, Republicans love Trump. They have loyalty to Trump. Democrats are falling in line. No one loves Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris has run for president before. She was such a terrible candidate that everyone, including Politico, ran full pieces on how awful her candidacy was. Then she was such a terrible vice president that half her staff quit. She is truly bad at this, and we shouldn't remember how bad she is at this. So all this sort of desperate hope that you're seeing in Democratic circles, reality will set in, I believe, soon enough, because Kamala Harris is not a good candidate, and she has proved that repeatedly. Remember, Kamala Harris, she's only run effectively one competitive race in the last 20 years, and that was for Attorney General of the state of California. She won by 1 point. By 1 point. Then she ran a completely non-competitive race in the California Senate for the Senate seat in California against Loretta Sanchez, a fellow Democrat. And then she ran the worst presidential campaign since Rick Perry. Listen, Kamala Harris is a terrible candidate, but then again, she was also a terrible DA. She was a terrible Attorney General of the state of California. Things got less safe under Kamala Harris. Speaking of safety, as social unrest escalates and as people begin to fear crime more and more, securing the safeness of your family is more crucial than ever. Now, listen, I'm a big Second Amendment advocate. I own a variety of guns, but if I have the ability to stop a threat inside my own home without killing anybody, I would like to do that. That is what Byrna is for. Introducing the Byrna Ungun, the non-lethal self-defense platform. Lightweight, simple to use. It uses an easy-to-load 5-round magazine and is powered by an 8-gram CO2 cartridge. Byrna launchers fire a 68 caliber chemical-filled projectile using a patented pull-pierce technology where the CO2 canister is only punctured on the first trigger pull. That means that your launcher is always sitting there at the ready. It's capable of incapacitating an attacker for over 30 minutes. It's accurate and effective at over 60 feet. It doesn't require permits or background checks. It is interstate travel friendly. With Byrna, you will be prepared to defend. The Byrna is a safer, more sensible alternative that could potentially save lives on both sides, protecting both the user and the aggressor. Visit Byrna.com/Ben. Get 10% off your purchase. That's BYRNA.com/Ben. Check out the latest news about Byrna. That's BYRNA.com/Ben. Here's Kamala Harris again, trying to make the pitch. We are not going to go back. We're not.
He and his extreme Project 2025 will weaken the middle class
Come on.
and bring us backward. America has tried these economic policies before. They do not lead to prosperity. They lead to inequity and economic injustice. And we are not going back.
God, she is so awful. I mean, even her juxtaposition right there of prosperity with economic injustice is truly amazing. Because, again, the opposite of prosperity is poverty. It's poverty. Right? When she says that we are going, they lead us away from prosperity and toward economic injustice, notice what she's doing there. She's doing the equity routine. You know what Americans don't like? The racialized equity routine that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have been pushing nonstop since they entered office. Her campaign, if she's actually in control of it, her only hope here is to delegate this thing to the Obama team. That is really her only hope here. She already got rid of the Biden team. It's not going to be Tom Donilon. It's not going to be Jen O'Malley Dillon. It's not going to be the people who got Joe Biden there because they don't like her very much and she doesn't like them. And it better not be her 2019 presidential campaign team because they were truly awful. Her only hope is to basically sit down and be quiet and let Barack Obama's people run this thing. That is her only hope. So far, that doesn't seem to be the case. So, for example, according to BBC, Kamala Harris has overhauled her campaign's online presence by embracing a social media trend inspired by pop star Charlie XCX's Brat album cover. The presumptive Democratic presidential nominee has scattered references to the album across her campaign's account, renaming her profile Kamala HQ. Her rebrand comes as Charlie showed her support by tweeting Kamala is Brat shortly after President Joe Biden announced he was stepping out of the race. By Monday morning, Harris had seized on Charlie XCX's backing, with the account sporting a new lime green photo in the style of the Brat album cover. So for those of you who have no idea what exactly Brat means because, you're over the age of 15, here's what Brat means, according to Charlie XCX. You're just like that girl who's a little messy and likes to party and maybe says some dumb things sometimes, who feels like herself, but maybe also has a breakdown, but kind of like parties, though it is very honest, very blunt, a little bit volatile, like does dumb things, but it's Brat. You're Brat. That's Brat. Okay, that is the campaign that I desperately hope Kamala Harris continues to run. Kamala Harris as Brat. Says dumb things, does dumb things, get drunk sometime, but has fun. Also, can I just explain? No one above the age of 25 in the United States knows what the F brat means. When we think brat, we think like spoil brat, like some of our children. No one thinks brat is something good. But Kamala Harris is so terminally online, so disconnected from the general public, that she believes that Charlie XCX, who, again, most people above the age of 35 have never heard of Charlie XCX. She thinks that embracing the branding of Charlie XCX is somehow good for her. That's how disconnected and terrible her campaign is. Now, for his part, Donald Trump slammed Harris as dumb as a rock on his Truth Social page. Now, again, I think he's going to have to do better than this in terms of the nickname. This is pretty. Here's what he posted. He said, wow, just watching the fake news, they're doing their very best to turn the worst president in the history of our country into a brilliant and heroic leader. He was heroic because he quit and turned dumb as a rock Kamala Harris from a totally failed and insignificant vice president into a future great president. No, it just doesn't work that way. He's been trying out a few different lines on Kamala Harris. So he has called her laughing Kamala, which, again, I recommend Scamala. I think that it is the best term for her. Also, I think Kamaliar would probably be good because she is deeply, deeply dishonest. Just a few suggestions for the president if he is taking suggestions. He did call her this morning Lion Kamala, which again, he used the lion's head, but then he also called Joe Biden Crooked Joe. So Lion Kamala is pretty good. Again, I think that's probably, and it seems like he's settling on that because he's used that multiple times this morning. He said, Lion Kamala Harris, the Biden-appointed border czar, who never visited the border and whose incompetence gave us the worst and most dangerous border anywhere in the world, has absolutely terrible poll numbers against a fine and brilliant young man named Donald J. Trump. Love that Trump calls himself a fine and brilliant young man. He's 78. Be careful what you wish for, Democrats, MAGA 2024. So, yeah, pretty solid stuff there from President Trump. Okay, now, what do the polls suggest as of right now? The polls suggest that she comes into this thing a pretty solid underdog. So the Real Clear Politics polling average has her already down 2 points. That's a slight improvement from where Joe Biden was in the Real Clear Politics polling average. The Real Clear Politics polling average put him down almost 4 points. There are 4 polls that have come out since Joe Biden was ousted from the race. The Morning Consult poll, which shows Trump up 47-45. The Quinnipiac poll that shows Trump up 49-47. A Forbes Harris X poll that shows Trump up 53-47. And then just before Biden dropped out, but it was really on the verge of it, a CBS News poll that showed Trump up 51-48. So Trump does have a lead against Kamala Harris. Not only does Trump have a lead against Kamala Harris, in the swing states, he also appears to have a lead. I should point out at this point, by the way, that Harris X poll for Forbes, which shows him up by a few points there, shows him up by 6 points. That particular Harris X poll shows her running dead even with him only among Hispanics. Okay, if he wins an even number of Hispanics, not only does he win the election, he wins the election very, very big. Donald Trump's poll numbers are looking really healthy, but if you want to stay healthy, you need balance of nature. As you may have noticed, we're flying around the country. We've got a lot going on, and that means I need to stay healthy. Balance of nature helps me do just that. Balance of nature fits easily into my day-to-day schedule. Imagine trying to eat 31 different fruits and veggies every day. That sounds pretty miserable and time-consuming. With Balance of Nature fruits and veggies, there's never been a more convenient dietary supplement to ensure you get a wide variety of fruits and veggies every single day. Balance of Nature takes fruits and veggies, they freeze-dry them, they turn them into a powder, and then they put them into a capsule. You take your fruit and veggie capsules every day, and then your body knows what to do with them. They're also kosher, which means that I can bring them with me on the road, pop them into those protein smoothies, and keep the gun show going. Go to balanceofnature.com, use promo code Shapiro for 35% off your first order as a preferred customer, plus get a free bottle of fiber and spice. Again, that's balanceofnature.com, promo code Shapiro. I rely on it, my staff relies on it, and we are all strapping and healthy because of it. Go to balanceofnature.com, use promo code Shapiro for 35% off your first order as a preferred customer, plus you get a free bottle of fiber and spice. There also is in this Harris X poll a wide divide between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris among likely voters. So the lead, that 53-47 lead, is among registered voters. Among likely voters, Donald Trump is beating her by 10 percentage points. That's without leaners, right? That is just people who are sort of inclined to vote, but are not, quote unquote, leaning one way or another. Like, the undecideds are not counted. If you don't count the undecideds, Trump is beating her by 10. However, if you count the leaners, then what you see is that Donald Trump is up 53-47 against Kamala Harris. If you look at the likely voters, he's up by like 10 points. So again, when it comes to registered voters, like the overall voting population, she's doing better than she does among people who have already decided to vote. Okay, whatever it is, these are bad numbers. The new Quinnipiac poll shows Trump up 45-41 over Kamala Harris. And the Quinnipiac poll tends to be pretty friendly. Again, that Quinnipiac poll, that is among registered voters. Independents have Trump up 14 points in that particular poll. So again, these are very bad poll numbers for Kamala Harris. Meanwhile, PPP polls, which is a Democratic fund, right? PP is a Democratic pollster. The last polls they have in the states, and again, this is before Kamala Harris was actually the nominee, so these were prospective. This would have been July 11th through 12th. Showed Trump up 1 in Wisconsin, 2 in Michigan, 8 in Arizona, 6 in Pennsylvania. So these are not amazing poll numbers for Kamala Harris. Strategically speaking, there's been a lot of talk about Kamala Harris turning away from the Rust Belt and turning toward the Sun Belt. That is not a winning strategy for Kamala Harris. So there's been a lot. Right now, Donald Trump is broadly winning Georgia. He's broadly winning Arizona. He's broadly winning Nevada. The idea that she's going to somehow close the gap in these states, I think, is wishful thinking. She's going to have to win Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. That is the blue wall. There's no one-for-one trade here. How exactly is she going to win Georgia? She's down 6 points in Georgia. Now, I know that Democrats believe that because Georgia, demographically, is about 1/3 black, that means that she's going to outperform Joe Biden. I see no indicators of that. The notion that she's going to wildly outperform with black voters, I think, again, is ersatz enthusiasm for Kamala Harris. She was such a bad candidate that she couldn't even get black support in the 2020 Democratic primaries. She was beaten by an old white man, Joe Biden, in 2020. So again, the kind of basic idea that there will be broad, enthusiastic black support for Kamala Harris the same way that there was for Barack Obama, I think is highly, highly unlikely. That's particularly true with black male support. Because, of course, she's a black female. She is not Barack Obama, who was, in fact, a black male. Now, so they're thinking Georgia. I know that they're also thinking Nevada. Nevada is about 11% black. But again, she's running really poorly among Hispanics. So hard to see how she makes up the ground there. They're also talking about the possibility of Arizona. This is also why there's been some discussion about Mark Kelly as a plausible Democratic nominee for vice president of the United States. Arizona is only about 5.7% black, demographically speaking. I'm focusing in on that because Barack Obama really focused again on that intersectional campaign. Kamala Harris is presumably going to do the same thing. If you're just looking at the states that are in play by percentage black population, then what you see is that the states that are in play that have a relatively high percent, at least a demographically outsized percentage by state of black population, are Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Georgia. Okay, again, she is running well behind in Michigan at this point, according to the polling data. She's not going to win Georgia. And so that means, are they surrendering Wisconsin and Pennsylvania? Like, how exactly does the map work for her? The map does not really improve for her. This is an uphill race. Beyond that, people are forgetting she is a terrible candidate. This is the key to Kamala Harris. She's a really, really bad candidate. Again, they're trying to fake the enthusiasm, but Hillary Clinton was a significantly better candidate than Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is not only charmless and weird, she also happens to be extraordinarily radical. In fact, this is one of the reasons why Joe Biden took so long to drop out. According to Axios, President Biden hesitated to drop his reelect campaign in part because he and his senior advisors worried that Vice President Kamala Harris wasn't up to taking on Donald Trump, according to 3 Biden aides familiar with recent talks about his plans. By the way, this is also going to be a roiling undercurrent that is really amusing to Republicans going forward. Joe Biden is pissed at Kamala Harris. He is rageful at Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi. So if you think that Team Biden is going to sit by in the shadows and then and do nothing or overtly support Kamala and just rah-rah her to the White House, it's not going to happen. Joe Biden is mad and his team is mad and they don't like Kamala Harris. They don't like Barack Obama. They don't like Nancy Pelosi. So there will be this sort of riptide against the Kamala Harris campaign coming from leaks from Team Biden. And that's going to be amusing to watch. It's going to be fun to watch as Joe Biden's team tries to undermine Kamala Harris. That's like an actual thing that will probably happen. You know, it's not fun dealing with tax problems. Handling it alone, if you got back taxes or unfiled returns, that can be a huge mistake. It can cost you thousands of dollars. In these challenging times, your best offense is Tax Network USA. With over 14 years of experience, the experts at Tax Network USA have saved their clients millions in back taxes. Regardless of the size of your tax issue, their expertise will work to your advantage. Tax Network USA offers 3 key services: protection, compliance, and settlement. Upon signing up, Tax Network USA will immediately contact the IRS to secure a protection order, ensuring that aggressive collection activities like garnishments, levies, or property seizures are halted. If you haven't filed in a while, if you need amended returns, or if you're missing records, Tax Network USA's expert tax preparers will update all your filings to eliminate the risk of IRS enforcement. Then they'll create a settlement strategy to reduce or eliminate your tax debt. The IRS is the largest collection agency on planet Earth. Now that tax season is over, collection season has begun. Tax Network USA can even help with state tax issues. For a complimentary consultation, call today 1-800-958-1000 or visit their website at tnusa.com/Shapiro. That's 1-800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com/Shapiro today. According to Axios, Biden, Bill, and Hillary Clinton, many Democratic lawmakers quickly endorsed Kamala Harris. Others did not immediately do so. But Harris's time as vice president has been occasionally rocky, defined in part by large staff turnover, retreating from politically risky responsibilities, and mocking from some Beltway insiders. According to Axios, much of Harris's staff has turned over in the past 3.5 years. About half of the vice president's staff is paid by the Senate, which requires regular disclosures. Of the 47 Harris staffers listed in 2025, only 5 still worked for her as of this spring. You understand how bad her office is? She had 47 Harris staffers in 2021. 5 still work for her today. I mean, that is nuclear wasteland levels of staff annihilation right there. People cannot stand her. They hate working with her. They think she's awful. During Obama's first term, then Vice President Biden had far more staff stability. 17 of his 38 aides stayed with him over a similar period. Former Harris aides told Axios the high turnover is partly because of how the vice president treats her staff. Some former aides said Harris had high standards that some did not want to keep up with. Okay, this has been their line for years. Again, watch episode 3 of Scamala, where we talk about her massive staff problems. Where people like Simone Sanders, who used to work for Kamala Harris, they'd go out there and say, well, yeah, she's so tough on her staff. That's why. And then she dropped out. She hated it and she left. Former aides referred to it as Harris, quote, prosecuting the staff, because Kamala Harris is not a good person or a nice person. During the 2020 campaign, Biden aides recall watching Harris interrogate her then chief of staff, Karine Jean-Pierre, to the point that it made others uncomfortable. After the election, Jean-Pierre left to join the White House press team. The relationship between the vice president's office and the West Wing has often been tense. White House aides sometimes felt Harris was not a team player and stayed away from any task with risk. In fact, I have it on fairly good authority that Kamala Harris spent enormous parts of her vice presidency playing solitaire on a computer. I'm not even joking. You think that that's like a joke. That is not a joke. She apparently sat in her office for hours on end and played solitaire on her computer as vice president of the United States, which is an outtake from Veep. At times, Harris aides suspected Biden's team didn't want to give Harris opportunities to shine. Well, I mean, there were no opportunities for her to shine. Number one, because bad policy. And number two, because Harris is terrible at her job. Apparently, again, Harris has been reluctant and cautious to participate in events that weren't tightly controlled. This is an amazing story. In 2022, apparently, the White House internally pushed Harris to be the headliner for DC's traditional gridiron dinner, but she resisted. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo did it instead. Not only that, in April 2022, Harris was the guest for a DC dinner at DC news mogul David Bradley's home, a salon-style event Bradley hosts with Washington journalists and newsmakers. Harris's anxiety about the dinner was such that her staff held a mock dinner beforehand with staffers playing participants, according to 2 people familiar with the event. Harris aides even considered including wine in the mock prep so Harris could practice with a glass or two. They ultimately decided against it. So understand, this was a friendly dinner, and the White House staff was so nervous about how bad she would be, they held a mock dinner with mock humans. Have you ever done that? You have an important business dinner, so you actually just get a bunch of your friends, and then you have them pretend that you're having dinner together. That is how bad she is at this. And that is on a personal level. On a presidential level, on a policy level, one of the big problems for her is she's done nothing as vice president other than be awful on the border. So you'll recall pretty famously that Joe Biden in 2021 appointed Kamala border czar. Here he was doing just that.
I've asked her, the VP, today, because she's the most qualified person to do it, to lead our efforts with Mexico and the Northern Triangle and the countries that help. We're going to need help in stemming the movement of so many folks stemming the migration to our southern border.
By the way, that was 2021. You can hear Joe Biden is already losing it at that point. But that was him appointing her border czar. How were things after that? Only the worst migration crisis in the history of the United States. And of course, you'll remember when she went on with Lester Holt and then explained that she'd been to the border. And then she was reminded that she had not, in fact, been to the border. And then she admitted she had not been to the border.
We are going to the border. We've been to the border. So this whole thing about the border, we've been to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I don't understand the point that you're making. I'm not discounting the importance of the border.
Well, I mentioned it because I know Republicans have certainly come at you on this, but Democratic Congressman Cuellar has a border district, has said to you and the president, come. You need to see this.
Listen, I care about what's happening at the border.
I haven't been to Europe either, or Disneyland, or Universal Studios. Oh boy, ready for 8 years of that, are you? That sounding great to you? Other policy wins for Kamala included that time that she announced her pronouns, because this is who you want as president of the United States.
Good afternoon. I want to welcome these leaders for coming in to have this very important discussion about some of the most pressing issues of our time. I am Kamala Harris. My pronouns are she and her. I am a woman sitting at the table wearing a blue suit. And
oh, good God. So what exactly are her qualifications other than she was elevated to a position she clearly did not earn? I mean, and when I say it didn't earn, I mean, she failed dramatically in her presidential primary. She was in the Senate for 5 seconds before she was granted that upcharge right there. So Chris Coons, who's an ally of the President of the United States, he was asked by Brat last night, so what has she done exactly as vice president? And Chris Coons gave this bizarre answer.
What do you think has been Vice President Harris's biggest accomplishment as vice president?
Well, look, I think she's done remarkable work across several important areas. Something that I think hasn't gotten much coverage is her passion for entrepreneurship, for wealth creation, for securing and stabilizing the middle class. She's traveled around the country to meet with small businesses and to talk with them about what it takes to get back to work, to grow a small business, to sustain the wealth and opportunity for a family.
I love that. So Bret Baier's like, wait, she did that? She did that? And he's like, I'm just going to keep going. I'm not pretend I didn't hear that question. Of course she didn't do that. I mean, that is an amazing, amazing answer. Okay, so tell me all the things that you've done. You know, you're doing a job interview. Tell me all the things you've done in the past. Well, I have a passion. I have a passion for doing things. Yeah, but that's not what you've done, you see. If I'm trying to look, for example, for a producer for the show, and I ask for their work experience, tell me the things you've done. And they say, well, I have a real passion for production. That makes no difference to me. What, like, I love cameras. Cameras are amazing. Yeah, great. That's terrific. Also, what have you done ever? The problem for Kamala Harris is she hasn't done anything ever, except be wildly dishonest with regard to everything from the Kavanaugh hearings to her own vice presidency. In just a moment, we'll get to her extraordinarily liberal record as senator. She was literally the most left-wing senator in the United States Senate as of 2019. And we'll get to all the things she said she would do if she were made president in 2020, which, by the way, is the best evidence of what she would do if she were made president today. Not what she did as vice president, where she works for the president of the United States. The vice presidency, as John Adams once famously suggested, no better than a warm bucket of spit. What would she actually do if she were president? Well, she said all the things in 2020. The nice thing about Kamala Harris is that we know exactly what she would do because she talked about it openly in 2020. We'll get to that in just one moment. First, as you know, Sleepy Joe is out. Kamala Harris is in. Well, we haven't talked about any of this stuff, and we need to with the crew at Backstage. Tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern, the Daily Wire's Backstage is indeed live. Join me, along with Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, Andrew Klavan, and Jeremy Boring from locations various and sundry, as we discuss who the left is going to prop up next, what dirty tricks they have up their sleeves, and how we're going to keep America from falling off the cliff. Do not miss Backstage Live tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern on Daily Wire Plus. It is free, it is live, it is going to be legendary. Okay, meanwhile, just how liberal is Kamala Harris? And this should be the attack line, right? Obviously, we all know her history, or we should know her history. Again, for the third time, go check out Scamala if you don't know enough about Kamala Harris. That's our series over at Daily Wire Plus. You get 47% off when you use code FIGHT. But everybody knows her history with Willie Brown. Everybody knows that's how she got started. Okay, but that's not really the issue in this election. The big issue in this election is not even going to be how weird she is. That's going to be made apparent to the American public over and over and over, because she is weird, whether she's joking about falling from a coconut tree or whether she's loving Venn diagrams and electric buses and laughing in that weird manner of hers. She is a weirdo, but let the American people see that for themselves. If you're the Trump campaign, don't focus in on how weird she is. Focus on how crazy she is in terms of policy. As the Wall Street Journal editorial board points out, mark her down as endorsing the spending blowouts that cause inflation, the Green New Deal, entitlement expansions, and student loan forgiveness. Until she says otherwise, we should also assume she's in favor of Biden's $5 trillion tax increase in 2025. Because again, all of the Trump tax cuts are set to expire in 2025. If she were president, should presumably allow those tax cuts to expire. As the Wall Street Journal points out, the vice president's 4 years as a senator from California are another window on her worldview. She sponsored a bill to create a $6,000 guaranteed income for families making up to $100,000. That's crazy, by the way. That is a giant bag of crazy. Universal basic income, guaranteed income, is a work killer and a redistributionist nightmare that causes inflation. Another Harris proposal, or a fundable tax credit that would effectively cap rents and utility payments at 30% of income. That, of course, would jack up the rents. Meanwhile, she co-sponsored legislation with Bernie Sanders that would pay tuition at four-year public colleges for students from families making up to $125,000, meaning that she'd spend trillions of dollars paying for everybody's college. Also, she co-sponsored Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All legislation paid for by higher income taxes. She has an extraordinarily long record of being really, really radical on a wide variety of issues. And all we have to do is go back to her campaign to note her bizarre positions that are going to hurt her in this campaign. So, for example, You may recall that back in 2020, when Kamala Harris was running for the Democratic presidential nomination, that she wanted to ban fracking. This would have been in 2019.
There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking. So, yeah, and starting with what we can do on day one around public lands, right? And then there has to be legislation. But yes, and this is something I've taken on in California. I have a history of working on this issue. And to your point, we have to just acknowledge that the residual impact of fracking is enormous in terms of the impact on the health and safety of communities.
Okay, so she wants to ban fracking. How is that going to work out for her in, say, Pennsylvania? Okay, Pennsylvania is a state that is heavily reliant on the fracking industry. Fracking also happens to be one of God's great gifts to humanity in terms of our access to fossil fuels. It has made America energy independent, effectively, and she wants to ban it outright. How is that going to work in Pennsylvania? We will find out. In 2020, Biden lost badly to Donald Trump in portions of southwestern Pennsylvania and southeastern Ohio, at least partly due to his comments on fracking. An outright ban on fracking is something that even Joe Biden did not endorse in 2020. So how's that going to work in places like Pennsylvania? How are her energy policies going to work in places like Michigan? How many Americans are in favor of losing their private health insurance? Is that going to be a wildly popular take? You'll remember that during the 2020 campaign, Kamala Harris also said that she wanted to ban and abolish private health insurance. So forget about you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. Nope. Kamala Harris wanted a full Medicare for all, Canada-style single-payer health program.
I believe the solution, and I'm actually feel very strongly about this, is that we need to have Medicare for all. That's just the bottom line. And I'll say this, and this is, I think, why you're also asking this question. What we know is that to live in a civil society, to be true to the ideals and the spirit of who we say we are as a country, we have to appreciate and understand that access to health care it should not be thought of as a privilege. It should be understood to be a right.
Okay, so she came out against you having private health insurance in 2020. She came out against fracking. What else did she come out against? Well, she wants to seize your guns, literally seize them. As she said this again in 2020. She said that she supported a mandatory gun buyback, which would amount to the confiscation of as many as 10 million guns. Here is Kamala Harris in 2020.
I want to follow up to something you just said there, because as you know, I mean, the 94 assault weapons ban, it didn't apply to weapons that were purchased before 1994. Right. What would you do about the millions of specifically assault weapons that are already in circulation? What do you do about those?
Well, there are approximately 5 million, to your point, Craig. We have to have a buyback program, and I support a mandatory buyback program. It's got to be smart. We got to do it the right way. But there are 5 million at least, some estimate as many as 10 million. And we're going to have smart public policy that's about taking those off the streets, but doing it in the right way.
Doing it in the right way. What she means by that, she endorsed a mandatory gun buyback program. A mandatory gun buyback means that you have to bring in the gun and sell it back to the government, or the government comes and seizes it from you. That's what a mandatory gun buyback is. Famously, she also said during that same campaign that she wanted to decriminalize border crossing. Okay, these are the most radical positions that any Democrat took during this campaign, and she is now the nominee for president for the Democratic Party.
You're for decriminalizing border crossings. You're one of the people that raised their hands at the debate. Do you agree with AOC that we should get rid of DHS altogether?
That is not correct. I am not in favor of decriminalizing or not having consequence for. We have to keep. Let me just be very clear. We have to have a secure border. But I am in favor of saying that we're not going to treat people who are undocumented and cross the border as criminals. That's correct. That is correct.
So even in that one sentence, she says she's not in favor of decriminalizing border crossings, but she's in favor of decriminalizing border crossings. I mean, that's what she says. The end of that clip is her explicitly saying that if you cross the border illegally, we're not going to treat you as a criminal. And then they made her the border czar, and you got the worst border crisis in the history of the United States. If these are all rich veins for the Trump campaign to mind. If they stick on this, she loses because she's far too far to the left for the rest of the American population. By the way, when she says that she is a hardcore prosecutor back from her days in California, let me remind you, she is not only not a hardcore prosecutor, she let criminals survive. Kamala Harris is terrible at her job, but you need to be good at your job, which is why you need Ramp. So let's say you're a finance professional looking for a better way to maximize productivity and cut wasteful spending. Ramp could be for you. Ramp is a corporate card and spend management software designed to help you save time and put money back in your pocket. With Ramp, you can issue cards to every employee with limits and restrictions. You can also stop wasting time at the end of every month by automating your expense reporting. Ramp's accounting software automatically collects receipts and categorizes your expenses in real time, so you don't actually have to. You'll never have to chase down a receipt again. Your employees will no longer spend hours submitting expense reports. The time you'll save every month on employee expenses will allow you to close your books 8 times faster. Ramp is super easy to use. Get started in less than 15 minutes, whether you have 5 employees or 5,000. Get $250 when you join Ramp. Just go to ramp.com/Shapiro. Again, ramp.com/Shapiro. That is ramp.com/Shapiro. Cards issued by Sutton Bank and Celtic Bank, members FDIC. Terms and conditions do apply. If you want to save time, if you want to save money, you need to check out Ramp today. Check out Ramp today at ramp.com/Shapiro. Okay, so famously, there was a case of an officer in California who was shot to death. She avoided seeking the death penalty in order to please her left-wing base. Here's a clip. This goes back to CNN 2020, talking about how she failed to seek the death penalty for a cop killer. This is who Kamala Harris is.
3 days after Officer Espinosa's death, Harris held a news conference pledging to keep a campaign promise: no death penalty.
In San Francisco, it is the will, I believe, of a majority of people that the most severe crimes be met with the most severe consequences, and that life without possibility of parole is a severe consequence.
So she let a cop killer live. Okay, that's who Kamala Harris was. She was a far-left prosecutor type. She's sort of a George Soros prosecutor type back in California. Then she becomes the most left-wing senator in the United States, according to GovTrack, a nonpartisan organization that compiles data on congressional legislation. They found that Kamala Harris in 2019 was, quote, the most liberal senator in the United States, more liberal than Bernie Sanders in 2019. So forget all of this talk of Kamala Harris, the moderate. She's not even remotely close to a moderate. It's why she's going to attempt to select somebody as a VP candidate who is likely, quote unquote, moderate. But that makes no difference. She herself is not a moderate. She took the most left-wing positions of anyone in the Democratic primaries in 2020, and then she got her ass handed to her. As well she should during this election cycle too. Republicans need to run on a loop all of the things that Kamala Harris has said, all of the things that the positions she has taken when she was an actual presidential candidate. Now, the media, for their part, they are trying, again, as I've said before, to make fetch happen. They're trying to make Kamala Harris a thing. They are running this thing back, and they're going to pretend that we've never met Kamala Harris, which is not true. She's widely known. She's the vice president of the United States. She's widely unpopular. But they're going to try to pretend that this is like your first intro to Kamala Harris, which means, wait for it, she is a black woman, a historic black woman who will undoubtedly be the victim of sexism and racism, despite the fact the only reason that she's the vice president is because of her sex and her race. If she were a white man, she never would have even been a senator from California, let alone vice president of the United States. Everyone, including Democrats, knows this. But they're going to pretend this is some sort of electoral liability, which is amazing to me. So the New York Times has a headline today: a lot has changed for women since 2016. What does that mean for Kamala Harris? Voters eager to elect the first female president pointed to anger over a loss of abortion rights, but also acknowledged a fear that sexism would remain difficult for Ms. Harris to overcome. Maybe the problem isn't sexism. Maybe the problem is she's a trash candidate. Maybe that's the problem. But the New York Times is now going to suggest that all of the resistance to Kamala Harris's candidacy is because of her sex. Meanwhile, the New York Times also attempting to turn her liability of weirdness into an asset. They're going to pretend that she has cool ant energy, when in reality, she has weird cat lady energy. That's just what again, not my fault. That's just what she's got. Okay, so the New York Times ran a tweet, says, quote, "You think you just fell out of a coconut tree?" Now, you remember that clip. That's the weird clip where she's laughing about something her mom said, and she starts laughing like a nut. So here's the New York Times tweet, quote, "You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? The internet has been abuzz with stories examining a meme involving Kamala Harris and remarks she made a year ago. Here's what to know." And then the New York Times headline is this the summer of the Kamala Harris coconut meme? Amazing. Meanwhile, the Washington Post's Monica Hess has a piece out saying this: curious about what kind of candidate she'll be? Kamala Harris's dismantling of Supreme Court Justice nominee Brett M. Kavanaugh 6 years ago is worth a rewatch. Okay, this is the same newspaper that gave her a failing grade on Truth when she proclaimed that Brett Kavanaugh was suggesting that birth control methods could be considered abortion-inducing drugs. Like, she lied repeatedly. 4 Pinocchios from the Washington Post. But now apparently she's amazing at this. If you want to watch the lies she told about Brett Kavanaugh, I mean, true disgusting lies that she told about Brett Kavanaugh. She was the ringleader of not only the fake rape charges against Brett Kavanaugh via Christine Blasey Ford that were completely unsubstantiated, no details presented, no witnesses presented, no corroboration presented. Not only was she the ringleader on that, but even before that happened, during the Brett Kavanaugh for the Supreme Court Justice hearings, she attempted to retail without any evidence a lie that there had been coordination between Brett Kavanaugh and Donald Trump's lawyers in the Robert Mueller case. She's a deeply dishonest human being. The media are trying to push her anyway. Catherine Rampell, who's a syndicated op-ed columnist for the Washington Post and a commentator on CNN, she put out an image of Kamala Harris walking and against a white wall, and projected from Kamala Harris, her shadow is the shadow of Ruby Bridges, who is the 6-year-old girl in Louisiana who was the first black girl to integrate a Southern school, as though Kamala Harris is similar to Ruby Bridges, which is absurd. That's ridiculous. Kamala Harris was born in 1964. Ruby Bridges was born in 1954, and then, as a 6-year-old girl, integrated a white school in Louisiana in the segregated South. Kamala Harris was born in 1964 and went to school in Berkeley, California, before she moved to Canada to go to a very upper crust high school. She was the daughter of 2 professors. Are you kidding me? But they have to make fetch happen. It's the only thing they could do. They have to. Meanwhile, the Associated Press put out just a phenomenal fact check. Just great. So the Associated Press's fact check here claim Harris got her start by having an affair with a married man, California politician Willie Brown. The fact, this is missing some important context. Brown was separated from his wife during the relationship, which was not a secret. I noticed that you didn't actually rebut the claim, which is that she got her start by having an affair with a married man. Also, again, I'll refer back to Scamala. In episode 1, you'll learn all about Willie Brown's affair with Kamala Harris, how he gave her a couple of sweet taxpayer-funded positions, how he basically won her San Francisco DA race and got her first job in the San Francisco DA's office. You'll also learn that it was because Brown's wife objected to Kamala Harris that he didn't end up moving forward with Kamala Harris and broke off the affair. But again, the reporters they are trying so hard to enthusiasm themselves. They're journalisming everywhere, hot, sticky journalism getting everywhere. Edward Isaac Dovere of CNN, senior reporter, quote, "One person familiar with the VP yesterday. Through all her calls at the Naval Observatory, Harris wore a hooded Howard University sweatshirt, workout sweats, and sneakers. Oh my God, she's relatable. She wears casual workout clothes. Wow. They got pizza and salad for dinner. She went with her favorite topping, anchovies. First of all, gross. Second of all, who cares? Who cares? And I understand they're going to try and make her relatable. They're also going to try to play up her black credentials by reminding us that she went to Howard University. She went to Howard University in a search to define herself. She says this herself. That's not me. She says that. But they're going to play up the Howard University credentials, again, as part of the intersectional campaign. The media they're really working this thing. ABC's Deborah Roberts, yesterday, she was out there praising the magic of Kamala Harris. There is no magic to Kamala Harris.
It's not a lock. Harris vows to earn this nomination for president, but many are noting that she is poised to possibly shatter that elusive glass ceiling in American politics. It's a moment that she's become familiar with since the start of her public service career.
Wow, she's going to break that glass ceiling by failing upward every step of the way. So, who will be her VP candidate? Well, one person we think probably will not be is Josh Shapiro, who is the very popular governor of Pennsylvania. He's moderate, he's pro-Israel, and most of all, he's a Jew. And let's be real, in the Democratic Party today, can't do that. Can't do the Jew thing in the Democratic Party today. That's not me saying that. That's CNN's John King saying that. And amazing how you can just drop a little bit of casual anti-Semitism. Not because, again, this is not John King being anti-Semitic. It's the Democratic Party being anti-Semitic. It also happens to be not the only person saying that. I mean, I've heard from people who are in Congress, who are not Republicans, who have said the exact same thing. The Democratic Party simply will not accept at this point a Jew in a position of high power, like Vice President of the United States. Here's John King saying just that.
Pennsylvania's Governor Josh Shapiro is being discussed as one of Harris's potential running mates. He also endorsed her tonight. In your view, what are the pros and cons for putting him on the ticket?
Well, he's certainly under consideration. I know that from key Harris allies. He's a first-term governor. He's Jewish. There could be some risks in putting him on the ticket, but certainly some of our voters here in Pennsylvania said, hey, we like Governor Shapiro. Give him a look.
Wow. Meanwhile, some of these smarter Democrats are like, I don't want VP. They don't want to be anywhere near it. Gretchen Whitmer, who has future presidential hopes herself, she's already dismissing this outright, apparently.
Are you prepared to take the vice presidency if it's offered, ma'am?
No, I'm not planning to go anywhere.
So if they offer it, you will not take it?
I am not leaving Michigan. I'm proud to be the governor of Michigan. I've been consistent. I know everyone is always suspicious and asking this question over and over again. I know you're doing your job. I'm not going anywhere.
That, by the way, is such a telling thing. If she thought that Kamala Harris were going to win, she'd be all over it, right? First all-female ticket. She'd be somebody who is likely to be the president after Kamala Harris. She knows Kamala Harris is in serious trouble. She wants no part of that. Some of the other candidates who have been discussed, Mark Kelly, the senator from Arizona. Mark Kelly, again, I have a hard time seeing how he brings much to the ticket. Mark Kelly. It also puts in play a Senate seat in Arizona. Again, because Kelly's a pretty popular senator in a very purple state. If Kelly goes, that's going to pave the way to a possibility that Republicans win that Senate seat in the next election where he would be eligible, even if she were to win. And there's been some talk about Andy Beshear. Andy Beshear did some TV last night. He's not all that impressive. There's been some talk about Roy Cooper from North Carolina. Again, none of these people are going to radically change the tenor of this particular race. She can't do much to change that. She is a radical, and there's nothing Democrats can do about that, and she's an unpopular radical as well. And meanwhile, one of the big questions right now is where the hell is Joe Biden? Like, really, where is he? So he went missing at the end of last week. And then he announced in a letter on Twitter, not even a press conference, not a statement to the public, not a video, that he would not be running for re-election, which is kind of insane. That's one of the biggest announcements in American political history. When LBJ announced he would not be running for the presidency again in 1968, he did a full-scale televised national address about it. Joe Biden released a PDF of a letter on Twitter in order to say this. And he's been missing ever since. He has not made one public appearance. He has not shown his face. Supposedly, he's going back to the White House today, but they called a lid, so he's not actually going to do anything at the White House. He will not be meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is coming today. He did not meet him at the plane. He's completely missing. I mean, does he even know that he dropped out of the race at this point? Who knows? Is he even conscious? It's like the movie Dave. He might be in the back room in a coma for all we know. So he did provide some proof of life. He called into a Kamala Harris campaign rally and sounded like he was on the verge of death.
I know yesterday's news was surprising and it was hard for you to hear, but it was the right thing to do. I know it's hard because you poured your heart and soul into me to help us win this thing, help me get this nomination, help me win the nomination, and then go on to win the presidency. But, you know, you're an amazing team, but we've got a great, I think we made the right decision. I know how hard you've worked, how many sacrifices you made, and so many of you uprooted your lives for me, and the kind of commitment few people make for anything these days, but you made it. And I've been honored and humbled. I mean this from the bottom of my heart. My word is a Biden, that for all you've done for me and my family.
Yeah, he's obviously reading from a script right there. Then Kamala gets on the line with Biden. Again, this is not a joint campaign appearance. This is not Biden getting out there holding her hand. She doesn't want to be seen anywhere within a 400-mile radius of Joe Biden because Joe Biden is wildly unpopular. And every picture of Kamala Harris will star Joe Biden from now until the election if the Republicans have their way. Kamala gets on the phone with Biden. Again, this is a campaign event. She gets on the phone with Joe Biden, and man, oof.
It is so good to hear our president's voice. Joe, I know you're still on the call, and we've been talking every day. You guys heard it from Doug's voice. We love Joe and Jill. We really do. They truly are like family to us. And we do, everybody here does.
It's mutual.
I knew you were still there. You're not going anywhere, Joe.
I'm watching you, kid. I'm watching you, kid. I love you.
I love you, Joe.
Okay, and then she says, thank you, Joe. And he says, no, thank you. And she says, and I have Joe's endorsement. And then he goes, yeah, you sure do. Well, I think that it'll quiet some of the rumors if at some point he appears alive That would be good. Like in public, since he's the president of the United States. He didn't step down from the presidency, guys. He didn't step down from the presidency. He's still the president. Okay, for like another 7 months. That dude is the president. And he's gone. They get him locked away somewhere in a hospital room or something. It's amazing. I love that Democrats believe that the best accomplishment that Joe Biden has ever done is stopping his run for presidency. That says a lot about you. If I say about my employees, let's say an employee quits his job, I say, you know what? You are a hero, my friend. The best thing you've ever done is quit this job. That says kind of something about, what I thought of the employee a little bit. But that's what Democrats are doing. Here's minutes of Democrats gushing over a deposed Biden. So he sucked when he was running, but now that he's gone, they love him.
Breaking news. President Biden has just announced that he is ending his re-election bid.
Now, we'll all remember where we were and what we were doing at this moment.
Him watching the waves at Rehoboth Beach, down the street from the boardwalk and the ice cream stands.
Joe Biden has been one of the most consequential and transformative presidents this country's ever seen.
Excuse me. I'm sorry.
What a man. What a patriot.
This is leadership. This is patriotism.
This is a day for Joe Biden.
He can read a poll. He can read a room. He can read a nation.
His heart is as big and as true and as strong.
He has been a phenomenal president.
Just delightful. Just delightful, guys. Again, it's going to be very easy for Republicans to link Kamala Harris to Joe Biden, but one thing they should also point out is that he's currently the president. She can 25th Amendment him at any time. He's clearly not with it. That means everything that he does, everything he says is on her right now because she actually has something we don't, the capacity to remove him from the office. I can't do it. You can't do it. Kamala Harris and her cabinet can. They ain't doing it. Why? Why? And the answer is because if she were to do that, then she would lose support among Democrats. It's all political. The only reason Joe Biden is a quote-unquote hero today is not because he stepped down because he's senile. It's because he stepped down because he was losing. It is all political. She's not a hero today because she's good at her job. She's a hero because Democrats are losing. That's all this is. It's all political. And speaking of political, Kamala Harris has now announced that she is not going to attend Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's speech to Congress. He's scheduled to address a joint meeting of Congress on Wednesday. Usually, the vice president, as the head of the Senate, attends such events. She instead is going to stay away from the gathering. An aide to Harris, according to the New York Times, said her absence on Wednesday should not be construed as a change in her commitment to Israel's security, but was merely a conflict with the previously scheduled event in Indianapolis. Yes, but why was it previously scheduled? Why was it previously scheduled? She is scheduled to speak at a convention of Zeta Phi Beta, one of the nation's oldest black sororities. So she can't go to a joint session of Congress for an American ally in a time of war because she has to speak to a frat in Indianapolis. Yeah, that's probably it. It's probably not that she doesn't want to alienate her radical pro-Hamas base. Typically, as the New York Times says, the vice president, as president of the Senate, sits on the House rostrum beside the House Speaker during joint meetings to receive a foreign leader, appearing just behind the visiting dignitary in a tacit show of support and welcome. But this week, Democrats are instead turning to Senator Benjamin Cardin of Maryland, who chairs the Foreign Relations Committee, to sit beside Speaker Mike Johnson and behind Mr. Netanyahu. Now, that is not a particular shock. That is not a particular shock because Ben Cardin happens to be Jewish. His maternal grandfather operated a neighborhood grocery store, and his family name was originally Kardonsky. So they found the only Democratic senator who's willing to sit behind Bibi Netanyahu because the party has so radically turned against Israel. By the way, that speech is going to be pretty important, especially given the fact that literally today, remember that time that we were told there were lots of moderate Palestinians and they were so moderate and that their moderation is why they should probably have a state because they're so moderate. By the way, quick note for those who want a Palestinian state, 70% of people who live in Jordan are Palestinian. They will never hold an election. It will never be a Palestinian state. You know why? The minute there's an election, they execute the entire Hashemite family, all of them. They kill all of them, and it becomes a terror state like that immediately. And then the West Bank turns into a terror state. That is why there won't be a Palestinian state. How do we know there won't be a Palestinian state? Because today, under the auspices of American enemy China, Hamas, Fatah, and all Palestinian faction agreed to end divisions and form a unity government. So remember that time the Palestinian Authority was supposed to be the strong moderating voice against Hamas? They just joined a unity government with Hamas the day before Netanyahu is supposed to speak before Congress. You wonder who the obstacle to peace is in the Middle East? I think it's pretty obvious who the obstacle to peace is in the Middle East. Okay, meanwhile, Donald Trump has been on the campaign trail with J.D. Vance. And he did Fox News last night. Here was President Trump talking about how he thinks that God protected him from being shot, which pretty obviously is true. I mean, if you believe in God, again, it is impossible to watch the videos of that shooting where 2 bullets passed within centimeters of blowing Donald Trump's head off and not think that God had something to do with it. Here was Donald Trump saying so.
Who would have thought this was going to be happening? But it happened, and I got very lucky. Or God. I think it was God, actually.
You know who said it was not God? Who? Ron Johnson, senator from Wisconsin, said he gave you that chart of illegal immigration.
Well, he's right about that. He actually gave me the chart. If I didn't have that chart, I wouldn't have looked to the right. If I didn't look to the right, a very bad thing would have happened. I wouldn't have been at the convention. I can just about guarantee it.
Okay, you know who's one person who speaks for God, though, is Joy Behar. So Joy Behar of The View, which is where they respect God the most. They love God over at The View. She says it's unchristian to say that God is with you, which is, I mean, I feel like it's a little bit unchristian to not see the hand of God in everything, right? I mean, I'm not a Christian, but I do know enough about Christianity to understand that Christians do believe that God has something to do with the things that go around us. Here we go.
I'm speaking to fellow Christians. I was raised Catholic. I'm a Christian girl. When something like this happens to you, like this assassination attempt, and you say something like God was watching me, that is a very unchristian thing to say because it's very narcissistic. What about Corey? What's his name? Compratore, the fireman who also got killed.
I don't know. I think some Christians.
What about all those guys who got killed on Sandy Hook? All of those people. Yeah. It's God was watching me and not watching them. There's something very disturbing.
God should have pulled the plug on that mic yesterday.
Wait, God is the technician now?
Yes.
We'll be right back.
You needed one.
Oh, these ladies. They are such geniuses. Such geniuses. All right, guys, coming up, we'll be getting into a fascinating interview that Elon Musk did with my friend Jordan Peterson yesterday. If you're not a member, become a member. Use code Shapiro at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us.